Hey everyone, Neil here from Redflare Studios, and today I'm going to do a Riverbed diorama base. I'm looking to also kind of produce this as a resin base, so what I'm going to show you is the techniques I use to actually sculpt and craft this. What I've done is I've done some SketchUps and some ideas for this. I've done a bit of research, and so my next stage really is to just focus on showing you the techniques that I'm going to use using various materials to make the original master part that I'll then mould and cast for later. So this stage is the first stage process where I've got the concept. So as you can see on the board now, I've got on the left hand side here my kind of idea and base with a couple of rocks that I've actually just taken from the garden. It's very simple. I wanted a smooth look to some of those rocks, so I've really just resourced a few of those, digging around the pathways in the garden to really kind of find some smooth rocks with a little bit of detail on them. The second base is just here. This is just the size. They give you an indication. It's about 120, 115, 120 mil on either side. So these I just ordered on the internet. They are just plain and laser cut, but they're really useful, and I think they're about 2 mil thick MDF, which is a nice material for taking the surface, or the plaster surface that I'm going to apply, the sand texture and the pebbles that I'm going to apply to it. So that's the materials that I've got. Really, most of the other materials I'm going to use are household materials and some specialist modeling materials, but I'll list those on the detail on the video later.
Now I've added a series of plastic card at the back here, so I just cut some card down, and I've super glued it to the MDF. And what I wanted was kind of use this as a way of kind of sculpting the material. Probably going to use just standard plaster material to sculpt that, and kind of make a highlighted back to it. So I kind of want to come down, following the diagram that I drew earlier, come down to these coarse pebbles, and then this will be the waterbed, the riverbed, and then there's going to be some pebbles sticking out of the water. So that will allow any modeler to apply resin, so kind of a thin layer of color clear resin around the model. So that's it so far. What I'm going to start to do is add this definition and detail, and obviously I've got my various rocks and stones, as I say, from the garden that I'm going to be adding in here, and that is going to enable me to really kind of add the definition on as we go. Now I've mixed up a small batch of just Plaster of Paris. What I've actually done is I have, probably can't see very well on this, I just say there, I've mixed in some just ballast material in there because it bulks it out, and I want to go for a rough texture. This is just a standard stick, and I am going to apply this. So, you know, this will take a bit of time to dry. But one of the things that I want to be able to do is just give a rough kind of stony texture to this. So it doesn't matter how detailed or messy this gets, as long as I've got that roughness to it. And then I'm going to feather this down, hopefully. So I don't really care if I get bits. So you know, what I'm trying to also achieve is this level of inconsistency in the way that the ground would flow. So you can see some parts of the ballast in there now. And that ballast is just an inorganic material, but you don't have to. You can just kind of use the plaster. There are other materials you can get, but one of the things that I wanted to do, I mean, it doesn't take long to do this, but part of what I'm trying to achieve here is give this base a stony texture so that it enables modelers to really kind of add a lot of detail to their dioramas when they're going to put their models and their figures on top. This would be good for a stormtrooper or you know, another similar kind of figure. So I'm just going to smooth some of this down a bit. Use some of the plaster. So I don't really care about covering up my my drawing underneath. I've got a good reference for it now. I know what I'm doing. So there we are. That's mainly it. Well, if you notice, what I'm not doing is I am not going to apply the stones at this stage. So there. That's as simple as that. It will dry and give me a cover on the side. So what I'll be able to do is then take off this piece of plastic and hopefully have a flush edge. So I'm going to let that dry. That'll take quite a few hours to dry now, but it will give me what I need to do. And you can see the, let me just tilt that up, you can see the height of the back there is just gradually sloping, but it's sufficient. Now I'm going to let that dry and come back to that. So I've got my base, as I mentioned, the Desamite material is set really hard on here, and it's really kind of set these rocks in place. So I've got a collection of materials. This is just standard sand, kid sand from a play pit. You can buy this in any hardware store. I've got Woodland Scenics material here. This is just a general modelling rock and stones material, just a neutral colour. And then I've got a little bit of a mixture of PVA and water here, which I'm going to use as my kind of material to glue down. This is going to get a bit messy, so I am just going to use a bit of paper towel and then with a normal just brush start to liberally kind of apply. So if you remember very carefully, I had this pattern here where I had finer rocks and stones. Oops, to be careful. See what I mean? The plaster's not great, so it's pulled off bits. Put some around here as well. So what I'm going to do first is apply just a small amount of the Woodland Scenics material. So now that I've got that in place, I'm going to simply just pick up a bit and pinch and apply. And this will set and give that additional layer. As I say, this is where it gets a bit messy because you want to apply as much as possible and then let that dry. What I'm also going to do is just apply another can see it's coming on. Now that's just adding this additional detail in here. Tipping it off. And you can see that the glue's just holding it in place. Now that glue's going to need to dry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some more. Right, we need a little bit of detail around here. And when you're putting these effects together, just have a bit of creative approach. Go back to your original drawings or reference material that you took. And what you can do is try and make it look as realistic as you wish. So this will all come off later as well, so you can see. And I'm going to save this. I'll put this back in the box. I don't want to waste that. And a lot of these materials aren't. When you're buying them, sand's quite cheap, obviously, but some of these modelling materials aren't. So you don't want to create too much waste. So that's that there. What I'm now going to do is I am going to apply a little bit more glue over the top of these. You can use an eyedropper if you wish, and I think I may just use an eyedropper because it's not picking up as well as I want. So I'm just going to use the eyedropper to just put down the glue. Now this PVA glue sets really hard, so it's a good kind of material to really kind of adhere and stick things onto the base. So using an eyedropper just gets a little bit more accuracy. And it means you've got your brush isn't always picking up the bits of stones as well, which is what you want from this. So once this is dry, I will then apply the same approach to the sand. So what I'm doing is I'm layering on the different textures. Obviously I started with the larger rocks and the stones, as you can see here. Just get rid of that. So yes, the larger rocks and stones here, and then obviously the big rocks from the garden. And then finally this material, the Woodland Scenics. So once this is dry, I'm going to be able to apply the sand, and obviously I want the sand in the finest areas. So that I'm going to apply with a lot more detail than this. This I just threw on because I wanted some rough areas. It's a bit messy up here. I think there's too much here. That's it. I'm actually just use a brush for that. Just actually spread some of this out. There. So I've got this band here where the river is, and then this is going to be a finer sand here, this area here. So I'm layering it down. This is going to be at the bank, so where you may wish to put grasses and greenery, and I've got some filling areas that I need to worry about here. This is obviously going to be the edge of the water, where you're going to have a lot more finer stones. And then lastly, this area here is going to be much more sandier, where the water would be. So what you're going to be able to do, and what I can do with this, is I'm going to build up some sides around here, and then I'll be able to layer in some clear resin water to give that effect, so the figure will be able to sit in the middle and stand on the edge, and maybe 1 or 2 feet actually in the water. So I want to go for a different effect. It depends on how you want to use your base to your best effect, but as I say, this is how I'm applying this. And I'm paying careful attention to how the overhangs are on some of these stones, because obviously I'm going to be casting this and moulding it and casting it in resin. So I don't want too many overhangs. So I've chosen rocks here that are very flat or curved and give a little bit of detail, but not too much. And also I've gone for rocks that have a smooth texture, because obviously if it's on the side of a water bank, and as you see from my original kind of resource that I've done from Google, I wanted rocks that had a much curvier and smoother edge to them. Now I've given this sufficient time to dry, and what I'm going to do, I've kind of added some more detail to this. So what I've done is I've laid down the sand, as I mentioned here. So there's still areas where the riverbed obviously is flat, but I've added these additional stones and a tree root, which is just a wooden branch, which I've just trimmed off at the back here. And likewise, what I've left is I am leaving the detail around the base here, as you can see. And so, that's really kind of giving a nice little bit of texture. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to add a few little rocks now. Again, these ones I found out of the garden, but they're small enough. These are, I think, just pebbles that you would find in a fish tank or something like that. So depending on if you've got a fish tank. So I'm just using a little bit of super glue, and I'm going to position these in place a tiny bit. I want a couple more rocks. Whoa dear. I'll say it doesn't matter where it goes, I'm going to get in there. Some of these are a little bit big, and I wanted a few rocks around here. Actually, that one's, I'm going to put it at the base here. Glue. So this is going to give a nice texture, nice detail here. In fact, these the PVA glue was really set really well, but I'm just setting these last few rocks in here with super glue, mainly because the super glue does work a little bit faster and easier. Come on, he says. There, that'll do. I might not add all of them. So these will be on the bank. So I think that's it. No, I don't think I'm going to add any more. So I'm going to let that dry. Next process will be giving it a coat of primer. That seals everything together, and I may give that a couple of coats of primer. I've got some kind of a little bit I'm a little bit worried about here. So this cavity here is going to be a real problem when it comes to casting. So there's a couple of little areas here as well. Can't really see them too well on the video. Let me see if I can kind of zoom in here. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a problem with casting, because it's going to cause the silicone to mold in there. So I need to seal that up. Again, a little tiny bit of plaster. I want to clean up the sides. There's still some of the plastic card here that I need to take off, and just make the definition of this side panel. So that's something that I'm going to finish off here. But then give it a couple of blasts of primer, and from that we will then be able to make a mold. And once I've done the mold, I will then show you the first casting, and then we'll go through, and in my next video I will show you how we paint that up and seal it with some clear resin for the water effects, and really show you how you can bring that to life. But for now, I'm quite happy with the base as it looks. This is going to be quite a hefty piece of resin, and so I'm just going to let all of this dry, and we'll come back to it later.